Now it is then in the light of considerations such as these that I would like to take this exploration of humility as a self-transforming path a bit deeper. Specifically, what I would like to begin to explore here together is the paradoxical fact that the liberation that we seek cannot be realized as long as there is still intact an egocentric basis for our experience of ourselves. That is to say, as long as there is still intact an egocentric basis for our experience of ourselves, we will, to some degree, take contemplative realization as ego attainment, and we will imagine ourselves to be a contemplative ego, or a contemplatively realized ego, so that we can finally get the respect that we deserve in our own eyes and in the eyes of other people. And this is why Merton says, as long as there is still a self left to have the experience of God, we cannot have it. It is only after there is no self left that can have the experience that the experience is realized. What I want to take deeper are the implications of what it means to cast our awful solemnity to the winds, the implications of what it might mean to forget ourselves on purpose, namely, to forget the self that forgets, to forget the experienced sense of self that is itself the embodiment of our unawareness of oneness with God. Now, I'd like to share with you a passage in which Merton opens up this aspect of humility as it relates to contemplative living. Thomas Merton writes, God, my God, God whom I meet in darkness, with you it is always the same thing, always the same question that nobody knows how to answer. I have prayed to you in the daytime with thoughts and reasons, and in the nighttime you have confronted me, scattering thought and reason. I have come to you in the morning with light and with desire, and you have descended upon me with great gentleness, with most forbearing silence, in this inexplicable night, dispersing light, defeating all desire. I have explained to you 100 times my motives for entering the monastery, and you have listened and said nothing, and I have turned away and wept with shame. This passage, it seems to me, is extremely helpful in becoming more aware of a fundamental dynamic that continues to unfold throughout the spiritual path. When we are first awakened, we tend to have questions about how to bring our awakening to fulfillment. As a matter of fact, this is one characteristic of beginners. The beginners have many questions. Merton once said, let's face it, we're beginners all our life. We're all sitting here together as beginners. But at a certain point in this process, the passage suggests, it starts to dawn on us that at a deeper level, it's not so much that we're asking God questions, but rather all along, God's asking us a question. Deeper still, we realize that we do not know the answer to God's question. Deeper still, we don't even understand the question. The experience is something like going, you think, to teach a class at a university. And you come in on the first day of class, and you're so pleased to see how many students have signed up for your class. And you come up to the front of the room, and you open your attaché, and you put your notes on the podium, and the students are continuing to file into the room. And at a certain point, an administrator comes up to you and whispers as gently as possible, "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. You are not invited to teach the course, you're invited to take it." And the professor who was invited to teach it is standing there with her attaché, waiting for you to get out of the way so she can start the class. And in front of the whole room, you're fumbling, dropping notes on the floor, trying to get yourself together. And there's only one seat left empty in the whole room, which is in the back row. And the professor begins to speak in a language that you don't know, and the first exam's on Friday. We do not like moments like this. And we could probably all think back in which there was something akin to us that happened. We thought we were teaching the course, and here all the while we are being asked to take it. And we don't even understand the language the course is being taught in. Nor do we understand the scales in which our progress in the course is being weighed. We do not like this. It is very, very difficult for us. These moments are so painful for us because in these moments our autonomous acquiring ego, the inquiring self that asks questions and finds answers, the self that we imagine ourselves and think ourselves to be, begins to tremble and unravel. By the way, it's not just moments of loss and confusion which can give rise to this humbling awareness. Sometimes it's joy. One Jungian analyst once noted that what we're most terrified of is joy, because there's no control in joy. It sometimes comes to pass that we cannot open our arms to receive that which is coming towards us, and at the same time hold on to our narrow understanding of who we think we are, what we think we deserve, or what we think is possible for us. But whether it unravels through joy or it unravels through embarrassing mishaps, the point is that the ground upon which we stand, the felt sense of who we so are convinced we are, begins to give way. And so we can say that Merton calls us on a journey in which the self that begins is not the self that arrives. For the self that begins dies along the way until in the end nobody is left. And that nobody is the self that God forever loves. I was once talking with Thomas Merton, and I asked him what he thought heaven was like. And he said, well, one thing's for sure, there won't be much of you there. He said, that's why we'll all call it heaven. This is why it will not be crowded in heaven. There's no egocentricity in heaven, which is what makes heaven so heavenly. He said to me, too, in this same conversation, the trouble with this monastery is there's too many men in here who want to be mystics. They don't realize that in being a mystic, there's nobody left. In this kind of language about nobody left, we have to be very careful not to interpret spiritual truths psychologically. That is, humility is not to be confused with an inferiority complex. We don't say, look at that person over there apologizing for existing, crouched down in the back row, hoping that they don't take up any space. We don't say, my, what a saint. Thomas Keating once at a conference noted how the Buddhists speak of no self. And he said, whenever you meet a Zen Roshi, a Zen master, who has realized no self, he said, they're always such a self when you meet them, that they sparkle or they stand forth in their uniqueness. And so this no self of which we speak, the self that emerges in the unraveling of our illusions, is not to be confused with a psychological impoverishment of a sense of self. Rather, it presupposes that we're aware of our commitment to our own growth, to actualize our potential, and to become all that we are and all that we're called to be. It's just that in that process, we are to realize a depth of self that in no way is reducible to, nor in any way is dualistically other than, that self-aware self. That is, I am committed to my growth, but I am not reducible to how my efforts to growth turn out, because I radically transcend my efforts in growth. And yet I'm in no way dualistically other than the concreteness of my efforts to grow in each moment of my life. When we hear language like this, it sounds so